Hey everyone, this is Greg Davis at Azola Creative, and today I'm going to talk to you about something that I think we all need to learn a lesson from when it comes to how we develop our careers, the way that we need to pivot sometimes in what we do, and how to just keep sticking to our guns and doing what we're trying to do. As a marketer, you're going to have periods of time where it really is a great fit, and there's going to be times where it may not be such a great fit. And a lot of that comes down to your surroundings. If you're in an organization where people get it and they are trust, there's a strong level of trust in the marketing division, then it's obviously going to be a really good spot. But when you come into organizations that don't necessarily have that same kind of trust, it can be a little challenging. I shouldn't even say a little challenging. It can be a lot challenging, which is part of why I do what I do, is trying to help people kind of overcome some of those types of challenges. But this is going to get a little bit more specific around just to how we develop personally and growing our career and growing our confidence and really just kind of sticking to our guns, like I said. But I'm going to tell you a story that really is based in the music business, which is, one of my favorite topics to talk about. And even more than that is I love talking about the Beatles. Now, what I can tell you about the Beatles, as far as like from my view, is, obviously I was not around to get to see them, when they were together as a band. So everything that I know about them, I get to learn kind of through a lens of history telling that story. And so, some of the perspective I have is easy to say now because I know what happened, but obviously it would have been a little different back then. And so when you look at the Beatles, each one of them has their own amazing stories and amazing strength. And so a lot of times people will ask me, like, well, who's your favorite Beatle? And that's kind of like asking who's your favorite kid. And it really kind of comes down to, depends on what mood you're in and how they're behaving. But when it comes to the Beatles, sometimes it's just kind of the mood that you might be in. There might be different times that you kind of connect with them at a different level. So for this video, I'm going to talk about Ringo Starr. Because really, I think that Ringo Starr is kind of should be textbook for how you continue to overcome challenges and develop your career kind of against the odds. So just to kind of level set here, let's think about this. It's the late 70s, the late 60s, early 70s, and the Beatles have broken up. And so, when you think about like Paul and John, I don't think anybody doubted that they were going to go on and be successful as solo artists. George was busting at the seams with a lot of music that he had written that he never got to release under the Beatles. So again, he'd written some amazing songs while in the Beatles. The most recent for him would have been "Here Comes the Sun" and "Something," which were mega hits for the Beatles. And so it was pretty clear he would probably go on and be successful as well. I think Ringo probably had a little bit more of a question mark around what happens after the Beatles. Now, there's no doubting the influence that he was as a drummer. There are so many musicians of that time and beyond that now, over the last 50, 60 years, that would call Ringo Starr a huge influence for them. So, as a drummer, obviously he could go on and he could do a lot of work being a session player or get into other bands. There was no doubt that would be something that people would be interested in. As a songwriter, he wasn't as prolific as, say, John, Paul, or George. He had written some songs. They were good, but again, he wasn't quite at that same level yet when it came to what his fellow bandmates were doing. So, kind of the question would be, well, what does Ringo do after the Beatles? Does he go on to be a session player and kind of go from band to band, or does he do something else? Well, this is what I think is so interesting about what he did, is that he went on to do a whole diverse list of things, as a drummer, as a performer, as a songwriter, as an actor. And I think that's what's really cool about Ringo's story, is that, he could have fallen into just doing the drumming, which I say just into. That would have been alone an incredible thing. And he did do that for several years, working with a lot of former Beatles as well as other artists. But what he also did was he tapped into a different area that he had a liking of. He enjoyed when the Beatles had made films. He enjoyed that experience, and he went into that space. And so One of my favorite movies as a kid was the movie Caveman. Now it's really hard to find this movie unless you can stream it somewhere, maybe find it on YouTube. But Caveman was just a fun comedy that Ringo starred in, and it's just one of those things that was just like, just off the wall kind of pun humor, and had some who was it? I think it was Dennis Quaid, I want to say, was in it, as well as I believe Shelley Long was in it. And so it's a cool, fun thing to go back and watch. So if you haven't seen it and you can find it, it's worth watching. If you have seen it, you remember it, and it's a good laugh to remember your childhood. But anyway, going back to this is that Ringo went on to do acting and became very successful in that. He also was the original conductor in PBS's Thomas the Train, which again a lot of people forget that he was that conductor for a long time. So he made his mark as an actor. But on top of all that, again, he still performed. But then one of the really cool things he did was starting the All Star Band. Now, the All Star Band, I think anyone probably watching this video would be somewhat familiar with the All Star Band. But if you're not, it's really a touring band that Ringo Starr brings together a ton of other artists that have made their mark in the music industry and pop culture through music. And he brings them into a touring band together, and they perform a little bit of everybody's songs, and obviously perform some Ringo and Beatles songs together. And so, they've had, it's been incredible names that have been in there. You've got Richard Marx, Sheila E., Joe Walsh, Bryan Adams, I believe. There's just, it could go on and on as far as the people that have toured in the All-Star Band. They're still touring to this day. And Ringo Starr, I believe, is 83, I want to say. And so it's pretty impressive as far as what he did there. So why do I tell you all this? It's not just to sit here and fireside chat about Ringo Starr, but it's that he was probably the least likely, in the current thinking back in the call it 70 or 71, probably the least likely that anyone would believe we'd still be hearing about 50 years later. But here he is. He's done all these incredible things. Obviously, behind the scenes has been influential, but even in front of the camera and all types of charity work that he's done. You name it. He has done a ton of things that has reshaped what his career is, what he is as an icon. And so I want you to think about that, because when you're thinking about your own career, there are going to be times you get knocked down. There's going to be times, like I said, you might be in a really good environment where everybody is really supportive. And then that might crumble because, if you're working in an organization, who knows, it gets acquired or people leave. There's all kinds of different little elements that can shake up a really cohesive team. And so think about the fact that you have opportunities to reinvent yourself. And it doesn't have to just be the thing that you were really good at. Obviously, Ringo Starr was really good at drumming, but he didn't just stay there. He went on and did a lot of other things. And so think about that for yourself, because that is sometimes what we need to do, is to build upon the success, not just stay in the same trajectory. I'm really surprised when I see people that have worked in organizations for 15, 20, 30 years. I'm not knocking them by any means. I don't mean that to offend anyone. It's just very surprising to me to kind of be in the same role for that long. It's hard for me to kind of imagine doing the same thing for that long. So I think reinventing yourself, and I'm not saying that they haven't found ways to do that, I'm sure, in their own career, but I just think that as a marketer, it changes so much. What was best practices 5 years ago could be antiquated by now. So change is inevitable when it comes to doing marketing, and I think that if you can find new ways to kind of shape your career, it's going to make it a lot more interesting for you. And by no means, don't listen to the critics. In Ringo's case, it was probably the media. I'm sure they had field days talking about, they wanted to publish a "Where is Ringo Now" article probably 10 years from after the Beatles broke up. I'm sure they were begging for that in their heads. But don't listen to that self-doubt or those voices around you that might be saying things. There's a really great quote. I don't know 100% who to attribute it to, so I'm not going to even say. However, I will just say the quote is, don't take criticism from someone you wouldn't go to for advice. And so think about that. if you're in a situation where maybe you've had people coming down on you, you've had people doubt you about what you're able to do as a marketer, don't listen to it. Just keep pushing forward and reshape what you're doing. Find the things that you love to do and build upon them. Don't chase your tail too long on things that are not in your wheelhouse, because quite frankly, there's a reason why they're probably not in your wheelhouse. I'm not saying you can't develop, but build upon the strengths that you have, or find ways to adapt those things that may not be in your wheelhouse. Find ways to bring them in and make it your way. And that's when it really becomes successful. If you just go around trying to be like somebody else, you get nowhere. But if you can adopt things, make it yourself, you're gonna go pretty far. So I'll leave you with this one last note, is to listen to the song "I Am the Greatest." It was written by John Lennon, but it was written for Ringo Starr. And it's a great song. John Lennon recorded it as well, but I think Ringo's version is the version that everyone probably knows. And it's a fun way just to remind yourself of how to kind of build yourself up. And I want you to be able to look in the mirror thinking about what it is you do and do best. And I want you to be able to hear those lyrics in your head of "I am the greatest." Hey everyone, thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful, please like and share it with your friends and colleagues. Be sure to subscribe to this channel and don't forget to leave a comment.